Welcome back, CA football fans, to another edition of This Week in CA Football. I am Bobby Broyles, along with Tim McDonald. Hope all of you had a happy and safe Labor Day weekend. Tim, I know you didn't move too far from the couch Saturday, did you?
Yeah, it was quality time. I got the pup, I had my laptop and the TV. Just, 12 straight hours pretty much, just watching. Football's back, that's all you got to do.
Indeed, that sounds great. Lots of storylines we can take away from week one, Tim.
Yes, sir.
John Robertson and the Nova gang putting on a classic in the Carrier Dome versus Syracuse. We got our first look at Elon as a member of CA football, Richmond's high-flying offense. But let's start with Albany's late heroics to pick up a big win over Holy Cross.
All of a sudden, you're checking the box scores and you look at the live stats, you're thinking, all right, under a minute left. All of a sudden, Albany, a little bit of a miracle in the Meadowlands for you old-timers out there.
Were you even?
No, I was not born yet.
You weren't even born yet.
Well, Greg Gattuso picks up a first win. Really, it's because Neil Morrison picks up a fumble. You see a helmet come off of a Holy Cross player. All of a sudden, the ball pops out, and you see Morrison 79 yards later with 44 seconds left. That's how Albany wins the game. What a way to win it. As a fan, you always come down to it when your team's losing. You say, maybe they'll fumble the ball. Maybe it happened, and that's how Albany wins. You know what? Columbus wasn't looking for America. That worked out for everyone, okay?
It did.
If you're Albany, you take this win and you move forward. You say, we escaped week one. Of course, you look across the board. Maine played really well defensively, a couple of struggles on offense. They looked really good. Richmond, high-flying, like you said, versus Morehead State, just clicking on all cylinders. Look across the board, too. William Mary played well at Virginia Tech, of course, lost. New Hampshire also lost versus an FBS foe, Toledo. Both of those teams played well and early. Across the board, you're going to say to yourself, okay, CA football, a tough weekend when you look at just wins versus losses. Of course, FBS games, let's remember, it's a tough task to beat an FBS team. That Syracuse-Villanova game, a perfect example, a heartbreaking loss. We'll get into that a little bit later, but still, like Taylor Swift says, sometimes you just got to shake it off.
Taylor Swift, huh?
Yeah.
I like that.
Taylor Swift.
I like that. As we look ahead to week two, Tim, we will begin with one of those teams looking to bounce back as Stony Brook takes on FBS foe UConn at noon on ESPN3 and SNY.
John Kinder, the quarterback for Stony Brook, was given the reins of the offense versus Bryant last week, and credit to Bryant, they did enough. It seemed like when Coach Priori was talking in the press conference, it seemed like Bryant did enough defensively to confuse Stony Brook. We know Stony Brook, traditionally wanted to run the ball. The transfer running back from UMass, Stacy Bedell, filled in nicely for Marcus Coker, did rush for 116 yards. Still, the offense for Stony Brook just a little bit out of sync. John Kinder didn't really pass the ball that well, only passed for 101 yards, 7 of 18. Got to be a little bit better. The Stony Brook team, if you say coming into an FBS game where there's a chance to bounce back, maybe it's this one. UConn just lost at home pretty handily to BYU, 35-10. UConn did not rush for that many yards at all, allowed 233 on the ground. So I think Stony Brook, just get back to the playbook, let John Kinder control the offense, and if that doesn't work, then they're probably going to go with another quarterback.
And of course, the return of Marcus Coker this weekend is going to
help.
It
should change the offense a little bit.
It should. At 12:30, it will be JMU on the road again this week as they play Patriot League opponent Lehigh. Tough first two games on the road for the Dukes, Tim.
People thinking, okay, this is JMU going to a Patriot League team. It's a nice way to bounce back after a tough FBS game. Not so fast, my friends, as Lee Corso would say. Lehigh's a very good team. Let's remember, the last 2 years, Lehigh has gone 18-4, but they've missed the playoffs. 10-1 2 years ago, didn't go to the playoffs. Last year, 8-3, didn't go to the playoffs. A lot of that is strength of schedule. That's why they're playing this game. Lehigh still hasn't played a game this year. This is their first game, which you can take that two ways. I think if you're JMU, you take it as a positive. You go into that Maryland game and you're first time under Coach Withers and first time in a big-time environment as a new team. Didn't really play too well at penalties, Bob. We know. I mean, you were telling me how many you were at that game.
6 penalties in the first quarter.
That's just unacceptable in a game like that, and really got away from them. Going to be really interesting to see. Lehigh plays really well at home. Jay Madison last week, we know they're going to go with Khalid Abdullah, who's the running back. Had 67 yards, 20 carries, so that proves, I think, that they want to start the ball with the run.
Yes.
I think James Madison, a really intriguing matchup. I think it's a game to watch to see which team can bounce back.
Over on ESPN3 at 3:30, another very intriguing matchup with lots of storylines as Richmond, who looked very impressive last week, Tim, takes on the Virginia Cavaliers in Charlottesville.
And I know we've talked about it too many. There's only too many storylines.
Yes.
We can't even dive into them. That's how short of a time we have here. Coming into this game, Richmond, of course, looked great versus Morehead State. They put up 55 points, win that game handily. UVA last week did not play that poorly against UCLA. Really a game that they lost late. Could have played a little bit better down the stretch. Let's remember UCLA scored 3 defensive touchdowns.
Yep.
You look at that game and you think of yourself, what did UVA do to UCLA? A pretty good offensive team. Brett Hundley's a really good quarterback. He's up for the Heisman. For example, he only passed for 242 yards through the air. That's a pretty good job by UVA defensively. Richmond offensively, looked absolutely great like they did last year. Like we thought they would come out. Yeah, they looked perfect. 55-10 again versus a different team. Morehead State's not UVA. It's a completely different foe. And this is a big game. I think there's going to be plenty of Richmond fans at UVA. It's a make-or-break game for the Cavaliers. Mike London, of course, coached at Richmond. He knows that this is probably going to be a challenging game. And who does UVA play next week? Louisville. So right now, I think the pressure's on UVA. And if you're Richmond, let's go down the road, see what happens in Charlottesville.
Absolutely. And also at 3:30 on the American Sports Network, Villanova will have their home opener versus Fordham in an early top 10 showdown. The Wildcats will be looking to avenge last year's defeat to the Rams.
Really snuck up and bit this team on the butt last year in the early season. Remember, it was at Fordham, a game where Villanova showed up, was very sloppy with the ball, turned the ball over a bunch of times, ended up losing that game. And people were saying, oh, well, what does Villanova look like? They lost to Fordham. Fordham turned out to be a pretty darn good team.
Yes, they did.
Still a really good team. One of the best quarterbacks in the FCS, and Michael Niebrick also has arguably the best wide receiver corps in the FCS. Villanova's going to have their hands full. This isn't a game where you can sit there and feel sorry for yourself after losing to Syracuse. People, say to that Syracuse game, oh, Villanova missed a 25-yard field goal, in the fourth quarter. They also missed a field goal in the first quarter, so I don't think you can look at one single play in that Syracuse game. You ask any CAA football coach, whether it's Andy Talley, who made the call, Dave Brock, up and down the list, I think people will tell you that they would have gone for two as well versus Syracuse. Had to do that. Of course, a really good showing. There's a lot to take away from if you're Villanova. Still, at home this week versus a really good Fordham team. Secondary for Villanova is going to be tested. I mean, there's no more of a test that you could have in week 2 of a season than what Villanova's going to get this week. John Robertson got it done last week. I think Villanova showed that they can pass the ball a little bit better in years past.
And of course, this Fordham-Villanova game, not a CA Football American Sports Network game, but this will be our first chance to see the new American Sports Network.
Thank you for reminding our viewers.
Absolutely. At 6 o'clock, it will be the, I say route, Tim, you say...
I say route, yeah.
You say route. Well, that's the Route 1 rivalry
you can't hear.
as the Delaware Blue Hens host Delaware State.
I know I said it last time in the preview, it really hasn't become a rivalry in the last couple of years. That's just because it's been a little bit lopsided. Delaware State played well versus Monmouth last week, put up 21 points. Ultimately, it was a close game, but eventually got a little bit blown out. So did Delaware in some sense. You look at that game versus Pitt, it's 42-0 at half. And that defense, it's a really tough way to respond. I like the chances of Delaware just being at home, and I like the chances for them to sit back and say, we were so excited to start the season, and that's how you come out and play versus Pitt. I think that defense had a lot of question marks, and maybe still does, but this is a good game to get back and get back to the drawing board and, get over that first game where, the score I don't think dictated what this season can be for Delaware.
Also at 6, William and Mary will stay on the road as they make the short trip to take on Hampton out of the MEAC.
Tribe quarterback Steve Cluey, I think he did a really good job last week at Virginia Tech. Yes, they lost the game, but I think he did a decent job in terms of just Jamie Laycock giving him the reins and saying take over. I think he did a good job. Virginia Tech was a team, I think, physically that matched up well with William & Mary, but in the fourth quarter, I think you just saw the difference and Virginia Tech moved away. Yes, the final score was a little bit disappointing, but I still think in the second half, early in the second half, William & Mary was in that game.
Yes, they were.
The Tribe have really done well in past years out of conference play. They played Hampton last year. This is an in-state FCS game. Hampton's out of the MEAC. Yes, it's on the road. It's not too far of a trip from Williamsburg. I like to think that Cluey and the offense will get back. We don't know Trey McBride. We don't know how serious his injury was. It doesn't look to be too serious. I think Mikhail Abdul-Sabor also rushed for 90 yards last week against Virginia Tech. I think William & Mary should get the job done in this game. It's a nice bounce-back game from Virginia Tech. There's still a lot to take away from that Virginia Tech game.
Albany looks to keep the momentum going, Tim, as they are at Central Connecticut State at 6.
A really interesting game because we see what Central Connecticut State did last week. Holloman, the running back, was the National Player of the Week, according to the Sports Network. And we saw what he did to Towson, and we saw Central Connecticut State beat Towson. Hats off to Central Connecticut State, a huge win to start this season. Now we see Albany, and we see how they got through week 1. Like I said, win's a win in week 1. It doesn't matter if you win by an inch or if you win by a mile. Win's a win. And, look at this Albany team. You're going to have to go to Central Connecticut State. Central Connecticut State come off that win. I think Albany, it took them a while to get going offensively. You really didn't see Will Fiacchi get going until the fourth. They were down 13-0, and they didn't score until early in the fourth quarter. Then, of course, needed that huge return. It's going to be a really interesting game. I'm going to see if they can get Omar Osborne back. He had 20 carries last week, didn't get over 100 yards. It's a lot of carries. I still think it's going to be a really good game. This is one of my matchups to watch this week.
Shortly after 7, we get to see the Rhode Island Rams for the first time this season as they face off with the Thundering Herd of Marshall on the American Sports Network.
Marshall's a very, very good team out of the Conference USA. This is a tough game. Let's remember, Rhode didn't play last week. This is Jim Fleming's first appearance as the head of this Rams program. Still don't really know who Rhode Island's starter is going to be under center. We don't know really what they're going to look like. I think it's an interesting game. It's going to be really tough for Rhode Island, I think, to move the chains, but I think it's also going to be a nice game to see. Okay, well, we know the opponent's going to be very good, but it's also nice to see what Fleming and what Coach Fleming and what this Rams team is going to look like in 2014, whether that's on offense or whether it's defense. And we think it's going to be a defensive-minded team. I'd like to see it now on the field.
And we wrap up week 2 with Towson, who will also be in the beautiful state of West Virginia as they take on the Mountaineers out of the Big 12 on Root Sports at 7:30.
Another game where you say, let's look at what both teams did last week. Towson, not to say that was a disappointing performance and Towson's the national runner-up and they should beat every team that they play at home. I don't think you can approach it that way. Coach Ambrose said, this is a new team. I think they're going to realize that. And whether it's as harshly as they had to realize it last week or whether it's right now. Towson only passed for 125 yards last week. Connor Frazier played well at times as a runner, still rushed for 80 yards, scored 2 touchdowns. And we know your boy, Darius Victor, he got over 100 yards, but still, I think this Towson team, it's a little bit of a wake-up call. Of course, it's easier said than done. They have to go to West Virginia now. And Clint Trickett, the quarterback from West Virginia, threw for over 100 yards versus Alabama. Over 300 yards versus Alabama. And if you can do that, I think you're a pretty good quarterback.
Yep.
West Virginia looked really good against Alabama. This is a tough game for Towson. Still, I think you come out of this one saying, what else do you have to lose after a loss in week 1?
Remember, fans, CAFootball.com is your destination this weekend for links to watch each of the CA football games that are being streamed online. You can also get live scoring and in-game stats on any device at CAStats.com and CASports.com/live scores.
And also remember to check back to CA Football on Sunday for the Sunday Roundup with all the league's action. And of course, continue to interact with us on social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram using the hashtag CAFB.
Tim, I promise I won't sing this week, but it should be
Please don't.
It should be an exciting week 2 around.
Yeah, it really worked out well for us now. It should be good. I think that was an eye-opening week, and I think it's just nice for CA football now to just say, all right, let's turn the page. But again, it's week 1. I know you like to freak out a little bit after week 1. It's week 1. Let's remember, a lot of things are first. Let's just relax a little bit. Pump the brakes.
Thank you for tuning in, and remember to catch another episode of This Week in CA Football presented by GEICO next Wednesday right here on CA.tv.